Well, good morning. I am really glad you're here with us this morning, and I just want to say you're in the right place. If you grew up in church and you were born in church, raised in church, you've never missed church, this service, this message, this teaching is specifically for you. Maybe you grew up in church and you drifted. Life just happened, a crisis hit, a struggle came, a hurt happened, you had kids, and just life went crazy, sideways, and this is your first time back, and you came on an invite from a friend. I want to say you're in the right place. This message, this teaching, this moment is specifically for you. Maybe you go to church, what we call Creasters, Christmas and Easter, because that's when you go. You go at Christmas, or you go on Mother's Day because that's what your mom wanted. I'm just going to tell you, this moment is specifically for you. Maybe you've never been to church. You don't know anything about Jesus. You don't understand that we just sang, I'll build my life upon you. I'll put my trust in you. You're like, I don't know what that means, man. This service, this moment, this teaching is specifically for you. And what I want to do is we start a brand new series literally called Not a Fan. Is I want us to understand what it really means, that's why this is for everybody, what it means to be a follower of Jesus. And so today what we're going to do is we're going to establish something called DTR. Have you ever heard that phrase or somebody says, I got to define the relationship. I need to determine or declare, what does this relationship look like? Now I'm going to let you in on a little secret. I had somebody in 1998 define the relationship with me that I wasn't quite ready for. Here's what I mean. As a freshman in college, and I got to know some friends, and we had a friend group in September and October, and then kind of mid-November, some of my friends started to date some different girls, some different people, and they said, Dan, you need a girlfriend. And I'm like, oh, okay. And so they hooked me up with somebody. We'll call her Natalie to protect her identity. It was not Kim. She wasn't there yet. And so Natalie and I started to date just kind of because our friends were, and she kind of liked me a little bit more than I did, and Christmas was around the corner, and I'm cheap. And I thought, I don't like her enough to go further in the relationship. I don't even want to buy her a gift. Just being real. And so I had determined that I was going to meet with her after supper in the dining hall, in the basement of Stairs Hall, and I just said, listen, I need to talk to you after supper tonight. And I rehearsed my speech. Baby, it's not me, it's you. I don't like you. I had rehearsed it. This is what I was going to say. It's not me. It's you. I don't like you. Okay, that was what I was going to say. And then she said to me, Natalie said, well, I want to talk to you too. And I'm like, okay, well, I'll be a gentleman and you can go first. And this is what she said. She said, good news. I just got off the phone recently with your parents, and I'm coming to your place for Christmas break. Oh. Now, what you need to understand is Christmas break in our household growing up was Christmas at home, and then Christmas on my dad's side, and then Christmas on my mom's side, and we traveled around and hung out with family, and it was a 12-hour drive from school to home. So now I've got to spend 12 hours in a car with a girl I don't like, 2 weeks traveling to see my family with a girl I don't like, and then 12 hours back. She had defined the relationship. She had said, I want more out of this than in my mind I was willing to put into it. And so we go home, and she meets my parents, and I'm like, this is a train wreck. And then she meets all of my family, and I'm like, I don't even like her. And on the way back, about 30 minutes into our 12-hour drive, I'm like, I can't handle this anymore. I don't like you. I said it a little nicer, maybe. I don't know. It was the most awkward 11-and-a-half-hour drive after that, because she had defined in her mind that this was going to be something, and in my mind, it wasn't. And what I want you to do this morning is I want you to think about this. Every single one of us is in relationship, whether we realize it or not, with so many people and so many things. Let me give you an example. If you bank online, you're in relationship with your bank. You're asking them to do something on time, pay your bills automatically, and if they don't, there's a consequence. But it's not on them, it's on you. You pay it. You're in relationship with your bank, whether you realize it or not. Some of us are in relationship with food. We just are. A couple weeks ago, I had a meeting I was driving home from, and the meeting kind of went sideways. I was expecting it to go one way, and it went a different way. And my wife, Kim, called me. She's like, hey, how's the drive home? How you doing? I'm like, well, I'm having a double-stuffed Reese's peanut butter cup with Reese's and a cherry Pepsi. And all she said was, not a good meeting, huh? Because I was stress eating, because that's what sometimes we do, don't we? We have a relationship with food. Some of us have a relationship with shopping. It used to be going to a mall. Now we just sit on our phones and we retail therapy ourselves. I got to feel better. I need a fix. I need a hit. I got to buy something. Because all of us, whether we want to admit it or not, are in relationship with so many people and so many things. And what I want to do this morning, and why I started the way I did, this is for all of us. It doesn't matter if you grew up, were born in church, or you've never been to church. We all have to define, what does our relationship with Jesus in this moment right now look like? And if you're not in relationship with Jesus, you've never trusted the good news and the grace of Jesus, then this morning is for you as well. Are you any closer to Jesus today than you were yesterday, or last week, or last month, or last year? On a scale from 0 to 10, define your relationship. Literally, pause for a second. Where are you at? Are you growing closer every day to Jesus? Or is like, you know what, I said yes to Jesus when I was in kindergarten at CYC, and I've just drifted, I've coasted. Maybe you said yes to Jesus because that's what your girlfriend's parents wanted you to do. I'm not allowed to date non-Christians. Well, I'm a Christian then. Okay, let's date. And you said yes to your spouse at the altar and yes to Jesus to get her at the altar, but you haven't said yes to Jesus since the altar. Define, literally, baseline, declare, what does your relationship with Jesus look like? And that's why I wanted to start this 4-week series about, is how do we declare, and what I love about the relationship piece with Jesus is he lets us choose. He said this, if anybody wishes to come after me, that means anybody. This is all-inclusive. If anybody wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. Well, what does that really mean? Because whoever wishes to save his life will lose it, but whoever loses his life for my sake will actually save it. Now, I want you to understand something. As you get to know me, some of you know me well, some of you are still getting to know me. One of my pet peeves is Christianese, insider language. Let me give you an example. If anybody wishes to come after me, he must deny himself, take up his cross daily, and follow me. If you don't know what that means because you didn't grow up in church, you're like, I got to pick up a cross? Think about what we used to sing. I'm not knocking hymns. You're going to hear it that way. I'm not. But think about our words that we grew up singing. There's a fountain filled with blood drawn from Emmanuel's veins. Who's Emmanuel? All sinners and sinners plunge beneath the flood, lose all their guilty stains. If you don't know who Jesus is, you're like, wait a minute, why is there a fountain filled with blood from a dude's veins? And I got to be plunged beneath that bloody flood. What is happening right now? Because it's insider language. Are you washed in the blood? Nope, that's not for me. I'm not getting bathed in blood. We sang this and we get it, but if you didn't grow up in it, this is kind of creepy. And the soul cleansing blood of the Lamb. So now there's a guy named Emmanuel, and now there's an animal? I got to draw blood from his veins and kill an animal to be saved. Like when you really step back and go, what does a non-believer, unchristian person, pre-Christian, de-Christian person think about the hymns that we used to sing? They're a little weird. Come and partake of the gospel feast, be safe from sin, in Jesus rest. Oh, taste the goodness of your God and eat his flesh and drink his blood. Okay, now we've just shifted to cannibalism. So now I got to find a guy named Emmanuel, tap his veins, get his blood, kill a lamb, and now eat him. Because the symbolism is real good. The symbolism is communion. That Jesus would say, this is my body and this is my blood, which was broken for you, poured out for you. This is how you become a follower of me. This is how you get to heaven, because God doesn't want heaven without you. I'm the way, the truth, and the life, Jesus says. If you don't go to church, you're like, I got to eat flesh and drink blood? It's really weird. I remember a few years ago, I invited a friend of mine. His name was John. I invited him to church. I'd never been to church. And we were sitting off to the side, and the worship team got up, and they started to sing a song called Holy Spirit, Send Your Fire. And I grew up in church. I'm like, yes, send your fire, fill me. And one of the lyrics was, set me ablaze, send your fire, burn in this place, set me on fire. And I looked over at John, and he was like, don't want to die. Set me on fire. After the service, we're like, John, what you think? He's like, a little weird. I was glad that song didn't come true. Set me on fire. Now, we get it if we grew up in church. If we have a relationship with Jesus, we understand that it's the symbolism. I want to be on fire for you. I want people to see that I love you, Jesus. But if you don't know that, it sounds really weird and strange. So we have to understand what we're signing up for. That this thing called faith, this thing called life, and this journey of faith is a dilemma that we face to do it daily. To follow Jesus, to surrender to Jesus daily is a really hard thing. And that's why Jesus said, if anybody wants to come after me, you can. It's all inclusive. It's not limited to anybody. It's for everybody. For God so loved the world, that he sent his one and only Son, that whosoever, that's all inclusive. It's not the 144,000. It's not just us in Western Pennsylvania. It's not just America. Whoever believes in Jesus. But the decision that you have to make and I have to make is this decision to follow him, to surrender to him daily. You might have said yes to Jesus years ago, and you've coasted or drifted. This morning is for you to DTR. Really determine, really define, really declare who and what you're following. Because if you read through the Gospels, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, 4 guys that hung out with Jesus, surrounded themselves with Jesus, and then wrote about it, Jesus was continually putting the onus on you. He was continually putting the onus on me. Because if God could make everybody follow Jesus and surrender to Jesus, don't you think everybody would do that if God could make you do it? No, we have free will. We have a choice. It's a daily choice that we have to make to surrender self to Jesus. Now, Jesus says this one step further. Listen, if anybody wants to come after me, pick up your cross daily. Now, if you want to come after me, but you don't hate your father and hate your mother and your wife and your children, your brothers and your sisters, yes, you don't even hate your own life, such a person cannot be my disciple. And I read that and I go, wow, that's harsh. That's actually a far cry from the Jesus a few verses ago who said, love your enemies, pray for those who persecute you. If someone hits you on the cheek, turn to them the other. If they take your cloak, give them your whole robe. Like that's opposite of what Jesus was just saying. So if you read that at face value, Jesus sounds harsh. Like, man, you woke up on the wrong side of the bed this morning. And then some of you are like, I actually hate my mom, so this is a win. But that's not what he's saying. What he's saying is if you put anything above me, if you put anything before me, you can't be my disciple. And that is a really hard concept to grasp. What does it mean to have God first in your life? This is what we grew up knowing or thinking or believing. God is first. Then it's family. Then it's work, your job, your income. And then it's your hobbies and any extra peripherals on this side. That's what I grew up learning and following and believing. And my dad modeled that to me. My parents modeled that. God first, then family, then work. This is what we live now. Family, kids, sports, jobs, careers, side hustles, money, status, affluence, hobbies, free time, self-care, and maybe if there's time left over, we'll sneak God in there or some sort of religion. We've done a complete 180 from what we used to do to what we do now. And you have to decide every single day what you're going to live out, which goes back to the question, where is Jesus placed in your life? And if he's not in your life right now, this morning is for you. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're thinking, Dan, I invited a friend hoping to hear a inspiring, fun, encouraging message, and you sound like this is a really hard thing to do. It is. It is really hard to follow Jesus every day. In fact, it's probably the hardest thing that you'll ever have to do. To pick up your cross daily, to surrender yourself, your plans, your dreams, your goals, your desires, and pick up His. And sometimes they align, and sometimes they don't. I specifically chose this series on purpose and specifically prayed for you by name this week. Because it is a calling that Jesus doesn't want any of us to perish apart from Him and spend eternity apart from Him. And it's something that we have to choose daily to lay down our lives to Him. So this book series, this series is out of a book called Not a Fan. It's by a pastor named Kyle Idleman. And he said this. He said, there's no forgiveness without repentance. There's no salvation without surrender. There's no life without death. There's no believing without committing. The problem with the American church is that we've presented a gospel that costs us nothing, but offers us everything. And that's not the way the gospel works. This is a really hard concept to let alone think about, to preach to you. Because you're like, Dan, this isn't fun. This isn't encouraging. The American gospel is actually a little bit different than the biblical gospel. Let me give you kind of what I would call a real-life example of this. A few weeks ago, I took my wife to a comedy club in Pittsburgh. We went and watched a comedian that I enjoy. And my wife said this to me. She said, honey, I want to be close enough that we can see him, but not close enough that he picks on us and makes fun of us and we're the brunt of his jokes. And it's true. That's a very good theory when you go to see a comedian. I want to be close enough where I can see his facial expressions, but I don't want to be close enough where you can go, and you, what are you wearing, sir? Or you, look at your hair. We don't want that. And that's the problem with the American church, is we want to be close enough to Jesus to get the benefits and the rewards, but we don't want to be close enough that it actually costs us something. And we have to wrestle this down, and the problem is we have to do it daily. And it's a surrender daily. And it's the hardest thing you'll ever do, and it's the best decision you'll ever make. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do, and it's the best decision you'll ever make in your life. So a few years ago, this is back in 2008, my buddy Eric and I went to Lehigh University. I was 29 years old. We went to the university, which is, don't boo me, don't hate me. We went and watched the Philadelphia Eagles training camp. Now, I get it. We hate the Eagles. Boo, stomp on the Eagles. Okay, I get that. Rant over. And so we're there, and I went to see training camp because I thought it'd be kind of cool to go see a training camp. We're watching the receivers run their routes, and we're watching the running backs practice with their handoffs. We're watching the massive 6'8", 400-pound linemen just push metal sleds like they weigh nothing. But I wasn't there to see them. I was actually there to see one person in particular, number 5, Donovan McNabb. And I told Eric when we got there, I said, I know so much about Donovan McNabb that I'm going into the locker room with McNabb. I know Donovan McNabb was born in 76 in Chicago, Illinois. I know he's 6'2". I know that Donovan McNabb played both basketball and football at the collegiate level at Syracuse University. I know that he won Offensive Player of the Year 3 times in a row in college. I know that he was drafted 2nd overall in 1999, only behind Tim Couch. Who drafts Tim Couch over Donovan McNabb? That's the Browns for you. Another rant over. I know that he took the Eagles to 4 straight consecutive NFC championships and then to the Super Bowl. I know everything about Donovan McNabb. I'm getting into the locker room. So practice ends. All the players start jogging towards the locker room, and I'm jogging with them. And standing at the kind of the entryway is this burly security guard with his arms crossed, and it says security across it. I'm like, sir, me and Donovan are pretty close. I know he's 6'2", he's born in 76, Chicago, Illinois. I know he played football and basketball at Syracuse. I know all the records, accolades. He actually led the NFL in quarterback rushing 3 years in a row. I think I could go back with him. So the wide receivers start running by. I'm like, they're pretty fast. Running backs, linemen, and now comes the red shirt quarterbacks wearing the red, and I'm like, Donovan! 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 Whew, right on by. Security guard looks at me and goes, you idiot. I'm like, I guess I'm not getting in the locker room today. And I walked away. And the truth of the matter is, there's some people in the room this morning that know everything about Jesus. All the stats, all the history. But unless Donovan knew my name and unless Donovan invited me into the locker room, I'm not getting into the locker room. And unless Jesus knows your name and in your relationship with him, you're not getting into that locker room called heaven. We can know all about Jesus, but that doesn't determine, define, and declare a relationship with Jesus. And I get, this is an awful kickoff, fall kickoff, invite a friend message. I get it. I understand. You're like, damn, I invited a friend. This is really hard. It is. It's really hard to follow Jesus. And it's the best decision you'll ever make. We can know all about him, and we can know memory verses that we grew up learning, and we can know the stats about Jesus. In essence, we want to be close enough to Jesus to get the benefits, but not close enough to do anything that requires something from us. So how do you this morning measure your relationship with Jesus? How do you DTR? How do you define your relationship? The first thing we all have to do every single day is we have to count the cost. What will this cost me? Because it will. It will cost you something. We're like, well, Dan, what would it cost me? It might cost you your family. I've known people who have said yes to Jesus and their family said, well, you're not welcome here anymore. Don't come around for Christmas. Don't come around for Easter holiday, the long weekend. Don't come around for Thanksgiving. You're not welcome. We don't follow him, serve him. I've known people that have just had promotions taken from them because they're Christians. Well, that's discrimination. Yep, that's how the real world works. It will cost you something. And you have to determine and you have to decide, is it worth it? It will cost you friends. It might cost you your inheritance from your family. It might cost you your kids. Will following Jesus cost you something? Yes, it will. Is it the best decision you can ever make? Yes, it actually is. But you have to choose it for yourself. I can't choose it for you. Jesus wants it for you. I want it for you. But you have to choose it every single day. I remember growing up, my parents never let us play sports on Sunday mornings. If it interfered with church, we weren't allowed to go. And I'm going to tell you, at the time, I hated it. It's the stupidest rule I've ever heard. As a 12th grade, 11th grade, 10th grade, captain of my high school hockey team, we were going to regionals every year. I was never allowed to go to the tournament on Sunday morning, never allowed to play, because it interfered with church. And at the time, I hated it. I'm like, this isn't fair. I'm boycotting. And I'd sit in church because I had to be there. I'm not happy about this. But what they were doing was they were teaching me Jesus is first. Everything else is secondary. Jesus is first. You're like, Dan, is your wife secondary to Jesus? She is. I love her with my whole heart. But unless Jesus is before her, I can't be Jesus' disciple. Do I love Jesus more than my kids? I do. Eli's crushed at that statement. I love him. But I have to put Jesus first. And you have to count the cost. What will this cost you? And what I love about Jesus is he lets me drive. He lets me choose. I get to choose. He doesn't choose for me. Kim doesn't choose for me. Eli, if he could, would put him first, but he doesn't get to choose for me. John Oros was a church leader in Romania during a communist era. And during a message one time, he preached his heart out, and people came to the front to respond to an altar call. And they would tell John, Pastor John, they would say, I've decided to become a Christian. And this is what Pastor John would tell them. If you want to become a Christian, there's a price to be paid. He said, I would tell them at the altar before they said yes to Jesus, I said, why don't you reconsider this? Because many things can happen to you. You can lose, and you can lose big. You need to count the cost because Christianity is not easy. It's not cheap. You will lose your family, your friends, your job. You can lose your neighbors and your kids. I need to tell you, you can even lose your own life. Would it still be worth it if you said yes? Now, we hear that, and we can't comprehend that because we live in a free nation. We live in America. That would never happen here, or we hope. But you have to count the cost. What will it cost you? In fact, Jesus even warns us about this. If following Jesus has cost you nothing, then perhaps you're not really following him. He reminds us of this. Listen, if following me has cost you nothing, then you're not really following me because it has to cost you something. It always will cost you something to put somebody first. And so if following Jesus would cost you everything, let me ask you a question. Would it still be worth it? If it cost you family, would it still be worth it? If it cost you promotions and affluence and influence, would he still be worth it? If it cost you positions and climbing the corporate ladder, would he still be worth it to you? You get to choose. I don't choose for you. I confessed a few weeks ago that when we were at a church called 12 Stone, I actually kind of began to worship the church and not Jesus because of what the church could offer. And I had to let that go. I had to lay that down and follow Jesus. If it costs you everything, would it still be worth it? Yes, it would. It cost us friends and family from Michigan to move here. It's worth it, but it costs. For you, is it worth it? What's the cost? Jesus says this, suppose one of you wants to build a tower. Won't you first sit down and estimate the cost to see if you can have enough money to even complete it? Because if you lay the foundation and you're not able to finish it, everyone who sees it will ridicule, saying this person began to build and wasn't able to finish. Evaluate this morning on that 0 to 10. Where are you at? And is it worth it to keep going? Is it worth the cost to keep going? How many of you remember, if you're married in the room, you remember moving in with your spouse for the first time? And you made a bunch of adjustments. Like, man, you had to learn how to put the toilet seat down. Your wife got one too many soakers in the night, and you got in trouble. Man, you quickly had to learn that while to you, the untrained male eye, both of those outfits look identical, but they're not. There's a subtle difference somewhere in there. And you'll never see it, but you'll hear about it. You think this looks better, honey? I don't know. They both look amazing. Don't make me pick, honey. You pick. You had to learn to evaluate what to say and what not to say in an argument. There was some readjustments when you moved in together and began to live together. There were some things you had to say. I got to learn how to do this properly because I'm not living up to it. You learned quickly, men, that sharing a blanket meant you would get none and she would have it all. Women, you learned very quickly probably that you don't cook that meal like mom did. You learned quickly that the clothes hamper is more of a suggestion. And as long as they're in the vicinity of the hamper, it's there. Might not be in it, but it's over there. Women, you learned quickly that men like to sleep like they're making snow angels. So while you're balled up in the corner with all the blankets, men are spread eagle. That's how we sleep. Making snow angels. There was adjustments that you had to make. But it was worth it because you loved them. It was worth it because you said, I do. Through good, through bad, through sickness, through health. I am with you till the end. And so you learned to adjust. Your priorities became main preferences, and their preferences became priorities. I will do this for you because I love you. And you have to evaluate this morning if you're willing to adjust your preferences to accommodate the calling of Jesus. To say yes to your surrender. And I'm just going to tell you very honestly, this is the hardest piece in the American church. Because every 13 minutes, you're targeted, you're sold every 13 minutes so that you can be comfortable. We are taught my comfort is priority. My preferences are actually priority. What I want matters. We're taught this every 13 minutes while you're watching You know, whether you're watching Jeopardy or Wheel of Fortune at night, you know, you're sitting around having your TV dinner. Every 13 minutes, whether you're on the Hulus or soon to be the Netflixes, you're going to be targeted. Your preference, your comfort is what matters. You got to have the best sleep of your night. You got to have the best sleep. Now we even have beds that are air conditioned and heated. Because I love to be cold at night. My wife wants to be warm. Now I can buy a bed that makes us both win. You got to have the best fashion. Which, by the way, if anybody can find that and wear that, I would love that. That would be amazing. Wouldn't that be awesome? That'd be so fun. If you show up to church next week in those, I will bring you up here and give you $20. That'd be amazing. But you're taught, hey, have the most fashionable thing, have the latest and greatest thing. You were sold a Snuggie. And if you bought a Snuggie, shame on you. It's a backwards bathrobe. That's all it is. They have turned the bathrobe around and stuck your arms through it. And they sold you because that's what they want. They want us to be comfortable. Everything in our lives is geared towards us and our comfort. And I'm just going to tell you, the call of Jesus is to deny yourself. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. And it's the best thing you'll ever do. The call of Jesus is to lay down what you want and pick up what he wants. Let me ask you a question. Will you let Jesus change the way you think? Will you let him change the way you view others? If Jesus asked you to change your voting preferences, your voting party, and switch to the other side, would you? Or are you so hell-bent on being right that Jesus doesn't get a place in that? When the pastor talks about politics, boy, does it get quiet, right? What if he said to you, hey, I want you to vote the other way this year? I'm not doing that. I'm right. By golly, I'm right. What if Jesus asked you to change the way you think? Because the call of Jesus is to deny ourselves and pick up our cross, which means we have to do things that are uncomfortable. Do you think Jesus wanted to pick up a cross and die? No. You don't want to know how I know that? Because he said, praying in the garden, God, take this from me. I don't want to do this. But not my will, your will. What if he asked you to forgive somebody that does not deserve it and has never asked for it and quite frankly never will? What if Jesus asked you to do something like see people with compassion that you have no compassion for? This is the worst fall kickoff message ever. It's the hardest thing you'll ever do. And it's the best thing you'll ever do. The call of Jesus. Jesus said, if anybody, anyone wants to come after me, you can. All you have to do is put me first. And the good news about that is that it is all-inclusive. And the good news is your past does not define you. Jesus does. Jesus doesn't say, if anybody wants to come after me, but you've had an abortion, you can't. Nope, doesn't say that. If anybody wants to come after me, but you have distanced yourself and separated yourselves from everybody and everything because of the hurt, yeah, you can't come either. Doesn't say that. If anybody wants to come after me, but you've had a divorce, he doesn't say that. He says, if anybody. It's all-inclusive. No prereqs. And nobody will get it perfect. And your past doesn't define you. Jesus does. If anybody wants to come after me, you can. So today, as we wrap up our time together, I want to give you an invitation. You've listened to me for the past 41 minutes probably or so, 40 minutes. And you've heard about how hard it is, how difficult it is, what surrender looks like, how to give this up. And it's not going to be easy because we're meant to be comfortable. And I'm just going to tell you, it's the best decision you'll ever make. Because when I've drifted, Jesus has brought me back. When I've struggled, he's lifted me up. When I've failed, he has picked me up. When I was defeated, he encouraged me. When I was afraid, he brought comfort to me. When I was questioning and wandering and wondering and struggling, he brought wisdom and insight to me. And he will do the same for you. Because no one's perfect. It doesn't matter your past. It matters your future. See, salvation is what Jesus offers all of us. And then through salvation, what he does is he creates your identity and he determines your destiny. You're a new creation. The old is gone, the new has come when you said yes to Jesus. So he creates a new identity in you and declares a new destiny within you. And the call of Jesus is hard, but it's the best thing you'll ever do. And maybe you said yes to Jesus, yes to the dress all those years ago. But you've just drifted. This thing, I don't know anything about this thing. Haven't wiped the dust off that thing in about 34 years. Cool, this morning's for you. I've never even heard of this Jesus person. This morning's for you. This moment is for you. So I'm going to ask you to do something that's uncomfortable. If you want to say yes to Jesus and the gift of salvation, a new identity and a new destiny in him, in a minute, I'm going to ask you to stand. If you want to say yes to Jesus because you know what, you've been coming to church for years, but you're like, I don't know if I've really declared, I need to do this daily. I thought this was kind of a once and done thing. Set it, forget it. Cruise control. This is easy. It's not. And you just need to stand and say, God, I got to resurrender this to you. I'm not getting this right now. This morning, this moment is for you. So I'm going to ask everybody to, what we in church call bow our heads. Close our eyes. If you don't want to close your eyes, stare at the floor. That's usually what I do. I stare at the floor. And if you want to say yes to Jesus for the first time, or you just need to say yes to Jesus for a real time, in this moment, I'm going to ask you to be uncomfortable and stand right where you're at. That Jesus will create a new identity and a new destiny within you. It's the hardest thing and the best thing you will ever do.